Hi, and welcome to part one of our video series, Engaging Mental Health. My name is Russ Philpott, and I'm a licensed professional counselor practicing here in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, I'm Christa Raitz. I'm also a licensed professional counselor practicing here in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Russ and I both work at New Day Therapy and attend American Baptist churches here in the area.
Recently, we were asked to do a video series on engaging mental health, and we thought, what are the four things that we could really focus on to give people the basics of how to deal with and understand mental health? The four that we came up with that we're going to talk about in this series are the basics of thoughts, the basics of feelings, understanding anxiety and depression, and clinical and spiritual strategies for coping with these. So one of the main questions that we get is, why do we have anxiety and depression? Christa, tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
Well, we can't deny that mental health is on the increase in our society. We see it in our families, we're seeing it in our churches, our workplaces, our neighborhoods. You and I are definitely seeing it in our practice. And not only is this a felt experience, but the research is backing it up as well. So why do we have so much now? Well, there's a few reasons for that. I think some of it is in our past, our ancestors were used to more struggle and suffering than we are. We have a lot of medical technology. We have a lot of information at our fingertips. In fact, too much information. And we think that things are going to go well or they can happen like this. And unfortunately, that's not the way the world works. Another thing that's happened is since COVID, we have had a lot of separation from one another in our society that caused a lot of isolation. People aren't engaging as much with their societal supports or with their spiritual supports. And so that has caused a breakdown in our ability to manage the things that are coming at us. So you might ask yourself, I'm a Christian. Why can't I rely on my faith?
Right. No, I think that's a very common question.
It is.
So I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think we think that if we have enough faith that we won't have anxiety or depression, but unfortunately, it's just not the way it works. I would ask you, why do we have cancer? Why do we have diabetes? Ever since the fall, there's been suffering, there's been disease in our world, and it's no different with anxiety and depression. It's something that it might have to do with lifestyle, but sometimes things are out of our control. We may have had anxiety in our families or in our depression that has been passed down to us. Or we just may, our bodies maybe just can't handle the things that are coming at us. And that's when we have more anxiety and depression. The good news is if we have a right view of the world and of God, this can really inform our thoughts and our beliefs. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about the basics of thought.
We have so many thoughts that go through our head in a day, and I've often challenged people to try to count their thoughts, and inevitably we get very lost in that very quickly because there's just too many to count. So maybe a safe estimate is to say we have thousands of thoughts that go through our head. I encourage people to think of that in the stream of consciousness, and in that stream of thoughts, we have everything from very negative to very positive, to neutral, and everything in between that is constantly flowing through our head. And I always say, that's why we can't turn off thoughts. People are often asking me, it's like, if I could just turn off my brain. Well, the bad news is you can't. But where we do have more control is, what do we focus on and where do we apply our focus? And what happens too is, if we get focused in on those negative thoughts that come in, so I have that thought that maybe says, I can't handle this. And if my focus goes there, my focus ends up fueling that thought that might otherwise, and kind of hold that thought there, that might otherwise go down the stream. So when I get focused on that negative thought and it gets bigger, it gets stronger, and it lasts longer. The other concept that we have to look at too is that where my brain goes, my body follows. And your body can't tell the difference between what's real and imagined. So here I am, and I have that thought of, I can't handle this. It's too much. And my brain is stuck on that. And then my body follows my brain to that thought, and it creates the experience that matches the quality of that thought. So my body is creating the experience of, I can't handle this, which is usually represented by anxiety, depression, stress, and those kinds of things. So we have to be really careful about where we apply our focus. If I can shift my focus and find a better available thought that is in the stream of consciousness already. So if I can go from, I can't handle this, to, I'll be able to figure it out. Then not only, again, my brain goes there, but my body follows me to, I can figure this out. And there we start creating an experience of resiliency, or one of perseverance, or things like that. So where we apply our focus is critically important on how we're going to feel and how we experience anxiety and depression.
So you may be thinking, oh, well, I have no control over my thoughts. I just have them. Well, there's a tool that we use in counseling to help people to be more aware of the thoughts that they are having, to help change those so you can change your emotional experience. And that is called cognitive restructuring. So the way cognitive restructuring works is that we identify those automatic thoughts that we have on whether are they negative, are they positive, and then look at changing them so we can change our emotional experience. If we can give you a picture of how cognitive restructuring works, we have a slide here to show you. It's A, B, and C. So if you can think of the A as an activating event, and the B being your belief or your thought, and the C being the consequence, that's kind of how this works.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you an example. If the activating event is you're recording a video series with your colleague, that's the activating event. Now, if your belief or thought about that is, oh my word, I'm not cut out for this, I can't do this, they're going to be judging me. Well, the consequence is then I'm really nervous and I'm going to trip over my words, hence what may be happening right now. So if I can change that belief or thought, still the same activating event, we're recording for you all a video series here. My belief or thought about that is the people listening to this are probably, forgiving people. They're appreciative of what we're doing. They're not going to judge me on making a misstep here and there. So then my consequence is I relax a little bit and I'm not nearly as nervous. So that's kind of how cognitive restructuring works. We really work on changing that B, the belief, or the, checking that automatic thought for whether it's distorted or if it can be, positive or realistic.
Yeah. And I find too a lot that we will know the logic of that I should find a better available thought. And it's sometimes hard to shift to that. And sometimes we need a little bit of help in finding those thoughts. But it really does change how you it really does change how you perceive things and how you respond to things, so you can come to it in a much more relaxed state.
So one thing that can help us with identifying those and changing those is knowing what common cognitive distortions there are out there. And so we have a list of cognitive distortions that we're going to introduce to you, share with you. There's a lot of information out there about these, but we're just going to give you a little brief understanding of what some of the common cognitive distortions are. So the first one is all or nothing thinking. And that's when you see things in black and white categories. So for example, if your performance falls short of perfect, you see yourself as a total failure. The next one is overgeneralization, and that's when you see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. Like I messed up once, so I am a total failure.
The next one is looking at the mental filter, and this is what we get focused on and what we talked about before. And when you get locked into a specific negative thought, our brain starts to create that experience as if that is all that exists. And so things can get really dark in that space.
Another one is disqualifying the positive. And this is where you reject positive experiences. Like good things happen, but you insist that they don't count.
The next one is jumping to conclusions. And I actually seem to be really an expert in this field. And this is where we can tend to do the mind reading. So we think that we understand and that we know where someone is coming from or what they're upset about. Or the other thing too is that fortune teller error. And this is where we think that we can look into the future and kind of know how things are going to play out even before we really know the truth of it.
I would agree with you, Russ. I think this is one of the most common that we all are guilty of. So the next one is magnification or catastrophizing or minimization. And this is where you exaggerate the importance of things as like your mistake or someone else's achievement. So you inappropriately shrink things down too small or they make them too big.
The next one is emotional reasoning. And this is when we decide because this is the way I feel that it must be true. And sometimes feeling states, as we're going to talk about in our next session, can get really exaggerated and really intense. And it can sort of, as I like to say, take the steering wheel of our lives, even though it may not be actually accurate.
Okay, the next one is should statements. This is another one that I think many Christians are pretty good at. So you try to motivate yourself with I should or I shouldn't do that, as if you had to be whipped and punished to do anything. Must and oughts are also offenders in this category, but the emotional consequence of this is guilt. Or if you direct them towards other people, then you feel anger and frustration and resentment with them that they didn't do something that you thought they should do.
The next cognitive distortion is labeling and mislabeling. And this is when, let's say, for example, I fail a test. And so I failed the test, but I'm not a failure. Or if I lose a game, yes, I lost the game, but I am not a loser.
The last one is personalization. And that's where you see yourself as the cause of all the negative external things that are going on in your life. So, for example, this recording here was a failure and it's all my fault.
And it would be.
Not just mine or Russ's or us together, but mine.
Yeah, sounds right.
So we've just probably barely scratched the surface when it comes to the concept of cognitive restructuring. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I would encourage you to look at some resources out there online, or if you're in counseling, talk to your counselor about that. But one of the reasons I really like cognitive restructuring is because it fits really well with biblical truth. The Bible and God's truth can help us in directing our thoughts and help us in challenging those negative thoughts that we have that don't fit up with God's truth. And so I'd like to leave you with a couple of scriptures here today that can help us when we frame how we think about our thoughts. And the first one is Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. If we bring our thoughts before God, he'll help us to change them. And then that can change our emotional experience.
One thing that helps to really kind of solidify the information that we gave you today is to take some time and to talk with people that you know, or if you're in a small group setting right now, we're going to give you some study and reflection questions to help you kind of think about how you personally relate to some of these things. So the first one is, what are some of the thoughts that you think over and over and over? The second one is, what thoughts or beliefs do you have that causes you distress?
Question number 3 is, what is one way that you can start challenging those beliefs that you have today? And number 4, what is a Bible verse that gives you hope and comfort when you think those negative thoughts? We're going to wrap up our time together with a prayer. So if you'll pray with us. Father, we thank you for the way that you've created us, our bodies, our minds, and our thoughts and feelings. And we just want to put those thoughts before you today, that you can enter our minds and help us to change thoughts that are causing us distress, or making our lives a little bit more difficult. Father, if we can have some help from you in lining up our thinking with your truth, we know that we can be better people to serve you today. It's in your name that I pray. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you back here for session 2, where we focus on the basics of feelings. Have a great day.